Today, of course, we know is the Yortzeit of Reb Shai ben Moshe. The Rav spoke about how he was busy being Mefarnes Yidden, always looking to help Yidden with Parnasa. And the legend goes is that most Rebbes in preparation for Tkiyah Shofar are going to learn Kabbalah and learn and do holy things. And when they peeked into Reb Shaila's room while he was preparing for Tkiyah Shofar, what he was doing is he was cutting up the cake for the people to eat after davening. So they looked at him a little bit surprised, and he says, "Well, everybody is so busy with Ruzin, the biggest, deepest, holiest secrets. I'm more concerned with l'soiva v'loy l'razayin, making sure that people are fed." So he was always very concerned that people should have what they need. Let's quickly review what we learned yesterday, and then we'll move on. So the daf started with the machlokes between Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yosy, whether or not a shemeres yavim drinks from mei Sotah. Rabbi Yonasan holds, like our Mishnah, that a shemeres yavim does not drink from mei Sotah, and Rabbi Yosy holds that a shemeres yavim does drink from mei Sotah. As an aside, there was a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. If someone does the bi of Yibum, Hashem's nus, is it a full nesuin? Is she a full wife, or only the chiddush of Yavamis that says that a bia without kavana works? It only works for those specific items listed in the parsha of Yavamis, which is that he now gives her a get to send her off, not chalitza, and B is that he is the exclusive yoirish of his brother's estate. Then the Gemara actually discussed three shilas. Iveris aldas, a woman who does not stick to the halachas, and Rashi explains that it's speaking about das Yehudis, which are the Rabbanans, although other Rishonim say the shaila is even by das Moshe, which are the Raisais, but it's only things that will impact their marriage. Does she get warned before she loses her ksuba or not? The Gemara brought several rayas back and forth. I don't think, the Gemara ended up saying, in fact, that we do have a raya, because at the end of the Mishnah, when it talked about the Bezdin making kinui, the Mishnah says the reason why they're making this kinui is so that if she doesn't listen, she will lose her ksuba. Then we had the question of, if a woman is a veris haldas, does her husband have the right to say, "I'm not concerned, I don't care"? And then we had a shaila of, if a Baal was mekana his wife, can he be moichel? We brought a raya that a Baal can be moichel his kinui. We brought such a raya that he can be moichel his kinui, and once we had a raya that he could be moichel his kinui, and the raya was from Sochli Zir Manshi Yerushalayim, a halacha that was told us directly by definition, that also says that if someone is not concerned about his wife acting inappropriately by veris aldas, he doesn't have to deal with it. He's allowed to keep her. And then the Gemara said that even though we said that a Baal could be moichel on this kinoi, that's only before stira. After stira, a Baal can no longer be moichel. Once the process starts, he cannot pull it back. Then we discussed women who were soitas, and before they had a chance to drink, their husbands died. Do they get the ksuba or not? The Shammai held she's a muchzik on the ksuba because shtara oimid ligvash gavidami, and turning on Talmud Beis, Beis Hillel said that she's the moitzi mechavere and she would have to bring a raya. Then we discussed Rab Nachman's halacha. This is what the subject of today's Gemara is. That is, the Mishnah discusses certain women that you're not allowed to retain as wives, and there were different reasons for the different sets of women that the Mishnah discussed, but one of them was women who cannot have children. And being that there's a mitzvah of pru'ervu, you're not allowed to remain married to a woman who cannot have children, therefore she would not drink from the mei Sotah. So the Tanakama says an akara and a zakena, as well as an islandess, do not drink from mei Sotah. And Rabbi Eliezer argued and said, who said you cannot remain married to an akara or a zakena? They won't stop you from being Makai and Puravu, because before the days of Cherem D'Rabbeinu Gershon, you could have married a second wife with which to be Mekayim Puravu. So Reb Nachman came along and said, even though the Tanakama says the Tanna Kamma is addressing three types of women, Akara, Zakena, and idleness. When Rabbi Lazar argues and says that they do drink because he does have a right to keep them, because he can marry another woman, idleness is the exception. He will agree that an idleness doesn't drink from a Sotah, and for a completely different reason, and that is because he darshes the pasuk v'niksav in Israel Zara. The only type of woman that will drink from the Sotah is a woman who is, I'll call her air conditioned. She once had the ability to have children, but an idleness was created without that ability. That's what Reb Nachman said. That's what we learned yesterday. And today the Gemara is going to challenge what Reb Nachman said. So I wanted to share with you, Bunny Spiegel had the same name as my shver. My shver's name was Bernard Spiegel, and he knew that I was in the air conditioning business, and he knew that my shver had my wife when he was a very, very old man. So he would love to tell me his favorite joke every time he would see me, and he would say, an old man, a very old man, once went to the doctor that he wants to have children. And the doctor said, you're way too old to have children. You cannot have children anymore. But the man insists, doctor, there must be a way. I want to have children. So the doctor says, I understand you're very air-minded, but you're not air-conditioned. The Gemara is going to now bring a raya, in fact, that even according to Rebbe Lezer, even according to the Shita who holds that an Akara and a Zakena do drink Mei Sotah, even that person would hold that an idleness does not drink Mei Sotah. I apologize. That's what Reb Nachman said. We're going to bring a raya that according to Rebbe Lezer, where an Akara and a Zakena do drink Mei Sotah, the idleness as well will drink the Mei Sotah, which contradicts Reb Nachman. And there's a long brisa that goes through all different types of women, similar to the Mishnah that we just learned. And one word in the entire brisa is where we're going to bring a raya from. And we'll point it out when we get there. If someone makes kinui on an arusa or shemer shavim, again, we learned this in the Mishnah, if her stira occurred while she was still in arusa, while she was still a shemer shavim, just as we learned in the Mishnah. A woman who has either carrying a child or is nursing a child, she's not allowed to stay married to her, because if she would become pregnant, her milk would dry up and the baby wouldn't have sustenance and he would die. And the Muberes Chaveri, if she becomes pregnant, it's possible that it will ruin and cause harm to the first flood. And that leads into a whole shaila. Can a woman who is pregnant, can she become pregnant again? Nowadays, we're not familiar with such a thing, but I don't know how things were in those days. But nevertheless, since he's not allowed to remain married to these women, they will not drink Mei Sotah and they will not get ksuba, like our Rashi told us on our Mishnah. They brought this upon themselves. They were soiser, they should not have. Therefore, they're not going to get ksuba. Divi Reb Meir. Shahai Reb Meir Omer. Reb Meir said that these women are prohibited for him to marry permanently. Lo yisa adam uberes chaveri u'menekas chaveri. Vim nasa, and if you wrongfully married that woman who you were not allowed to, yoitzi v'lo yachzer lamus. They give him a knas. Even though technically once the child is 2 years old, there's no issue anymore. But since you married this woman earlier than you were allowed to, we're going to prohibit you permanently from marrying this woman. Clearly, this is a very serious issue. Chachamim take this very serious. But for Chachamim, Yosy, we will make him divorce her. We don't want her to be with him. But but when the child is 2 years old, he's allowed to take her in. This particular halacha is actually only a derabbanan, that a muberes chaveroi, a menekas chaveroi, is not allowed to get nesuin, is not allowed to have relations with another man. But even though it's derabbanan, it's treated in the poskim much, much more stringently than even isurim daraisa. And the reason for it is, Sofer says, Chamira sakanta meisura. This is very serious. This is a child's health that's in question, and you see in the poskim, this was treated very, very, very carefully. A roiva. What's a roiva? Rashi says it's a bacher, kamayelad ravi, a young man who still needs to procreate, still needs to build a family. Shenasa akara uzakena. If he married a woman who cannot have children, and ve'ein lo isha ubanim, and he doesn't already have children, then the Girsa skips the next word. Lo yishaysev lo noitlas ksuba. he's not allowed to remain married to women who cannot give him children unless he already has children. Therefore, it's called, again, a prohibited marriage, and therefore there's no din ksuba, no din mesaita. Rabbi Lazar Omer, yochel hu lisa acheres, it's not a prohibited marriage because he could find another wife as well. This is pre-Chayrim the Rabbeinu Gershon times, and he can surely be Mekayim Pru Revu with another woman. Avo Hamakanela Rusasai. But if someone does kinut his arusa ulishemesh mishloi umisha kansa nistera, and the stira didn't happen until she was already in the suah, like we learned yesterday, the kinui of the erisin or during the shemesh yavim period will still be in effect after she's completely in his domain, and therefore if she makes stira at that point, she has the din of a regular isha saita, and she has a choice. Either she drinks the water and exonerates herself or blows up, but if she doesn't, she will lose her ksuba. Muberes umenekes atzmai, someone's own fetus or someone's own child. Oy shoisa, oy loy noitelas ksuba. Again, she has an option. What about someone, a young man, who can still procreate, who married in the Kara Zakena, but he happens to have children already? That's an allowed marriage, it's a condoned marriage, and therefore all of the halachas of Sotah apply. How about an Eishes Mamzer Lemamzer? And this is going to bring up a very interesting shaila. An Eishes Mamzer Lemamzer, a Mamzer can only marry a Mamzeres, right? So that sounds like it's a condoned marriage. But the question is, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, when a Mamzer marries a Mamzeres, their children are Mamzerim. So they're making Mamzerim. Are they Mekayim the mitzvah of Puravu if they're making children that we don't really want? They're making illegitimate children. If someone does an Aveira and is Noyef, and out of that terrible Aveira comes a child, does that person Mekayim Puravu? That's a discussion that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Ve'eshes Nesin L'Nesin, Ve'eshes Ger Ve'evid Meshucher, and here's the key word. The islandess. What does it say about an islandess? So this brisa says black and white that an islandess is included in the list of women who do have the parsha of Sotah. So this brisa clearly is going according to Rabbi Lozer, because this brisa says that a zakena and an akara you're allowed to stay married to, because you could be mekayim pru by marrying another wife. And according to Rabbi Lozer, the brisa also says that the islandess will drink from the Mei Sotah, which is a direct contradiction to what Rab Nachman said. Katani mi islandess. Tiyufte Rab Nachman. This is a direct contradiction to what Rab Nachman said, that Rabbi Lozer holds he agrees that by an islandess, because of a nixer of an Israel Zara, that she would not be able to drink the Mei Sotah. Amalach Rab Nachman, Dr. Rab Nachman, you're 100% right. This brisa that you just cited disagrees with me. But if you learn the rest of the brisa, you'll see there's a Tana there who agrees with me. Tanoi, whether or not Rabbi Eliezer agrees by idleness that she may not drink, or Rabbi Eliezer maintains his position that she could drink, is totally in a machlekes Tanoim. And Ayu said that Rabbi Eliezer agrees that an islandess cannot drink, is following a different Tana. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, idleness, loy shoysa, loy noitelas ksuba. Exactly like Nachman, and he even brings the same raya. Shenemar, the Niksav and Israel Zara, Mishadarka Lazria, a woman that was created with childbearing capabilities, is a woman who's included in the Parsha of Sotah. Yotzes Azu, it excludes an idleness, Shendarka Lazria. She's not air conditioned. Correct the Gemara, the Rabbanon who hold, in fact, that a woman who's an idleness will be included in the Parsha of Sotah, they're clearly not going to learn the limud that we just discussed from the Nixer of an Israel Zara. So the Rabbanon have a Nixer of an Israel Zara, my Abdullah. What do they learn from there? This is a famous, beautiful sugya. You know what they use the Nixer of an Israel Zara to tell us? The following. It says the Nixer, if she's clean, then the Israel Zara shall have children. We learn from there, Shem Haisa Akara Nivkedes. If up until that point she was childless, Hashem is going to change her mitzias, make a huge nest gully, and she will be able to conceive children. Divi Rabbi Kiva, that's what Rabbi Kiva said. Omerloi Rabbi Shmuel said, that's not good. That's not good to say. That's pushing it way too far. Because every woman who's in akara will bedavka be soiser, so that they could drink the Sotah and then enjoy its healing qualities. Vizu, and the poor akara who's an erlicha woman who's sneistic, who won't want to put herself into such a situation. Are you going to tell me that someone who's erlich, they're going to have to be stuck childless, and someone who's willing to do things that are inappropriate, they're going to get the schar? How you talking? Therefore, I disagree that in fact a woman will be able to become childbearing from the Sotah. Now, what's the problem? You don't forget that women should be able to get children. Why is that such a bad thing? The problem is every time they do this, we're going to be wiping out Shem Hashem. So we don't want to create a run on the Shem Hashem, that everybody's going to be running to wipe out the Shem Hashem. Dr. Gemara, what are we going to learn from V'niksa v'nizra zara? Elamai, we're going to learn that sure, there's an improvement, but not such a miraculous improvement, an incremental improvement. If she had painful birth, you let this berevach, she'll have less pain in her birth. Nekeves, if she gave birth to nekeves, you let this charb, she'll give birth to men. I'm not going to comment on that, but it seems from the Gemara that it's better to have male children. Just saying. Kitzarim, if she used to have short children, what's wrong with short? You let this aruchim, she'll have tall children. Shcharim, if she has children with a dark complexion, you let this levenim, she'll have white children. So once again, they're incentivized to go around and be Meichik Shem Hashem to improve their children. Toshvis bleibt schwer. But we can answer that, women, they need a child, they'll go do these things. But to make their child better, every mother will say, what do you mean? My child is perfectly looking the way they are. I don't need to change anything. That's what the Gemara says, so she loses everything. The fifth floor, that's right. That just goes to prove that they always want more. That's right.
But that is promising them, you already have, I'll give you something you don't have, and you'll experience that desire value.
Very nice.
Right?
Very nice.
Males, I'll give you females, not that they're better.
Very nice.
If a woman has a girl, she wants boys. If she has boys, oh yeah, I wish I had a girl. It's not because one is better than the other. White and dark, then I won't find.
So someone used this threat in the history of our Klal Yisrael. Chana used this threat. She says, I think she says in Yira Nira, she used it a double lotion, and the Gemara darshans that she sort of threatened Hashem. She said, Hashem, if you're going to play nice and you're going to give me my child, okay, then we can get along. But if you're not going to play nice and you're not going to give me my child, I'll teach you. I'm going to go be soiser, and then you're going to have to give me a child. It's interesting that Chana would get that aggressive, but what's more interesting is Chana is going to do an Isser. She's going to be over on Yichud and be soiser with a man. She'll do that to have a child. How can we suspect Chana, who is the mother of Shmuel and Ovi, to do something like that? Zoktir is Zogdir Mefarshim. You have a raya from here, but we're going to learn the Gemara later that a person could be Mekana, his wife, even from an Arab. A person could say, I don't want you to go into seclusion with your father. A woman who secludes with her father, that's not Yichud. Even relationships that are not Yichud, you could do Kiniyad. So that's what she meant she was going to do. Of course, Chana wouldn't have a Havamina to do an Isser, but she was able to orchestrate that there should be Kiniyad. So she threatened Hashem, you either play nice or what is it, the wrath of a woman scorned? What's the lesson? Hell has no fury like the wrath of a woman scorned. Yeah, Mechenina is a little different than I'm going to get what I want. Yeah, I heard. But then there's another big shaila. Even if a woman is v'niksa, even if she wasn't mezana, there's no way you could say she's a tzedekis. She was acting promiscuous. She was behaving highly in inappropriate fashion. So she was a nitma. But for that she deserves schar. At best, she's a prutza. So why is he entitled to schar for being a prutza. How could you say such a thing? Zok the Chasam Sofer in Shuvas Choshim, he has this tucked away in his Shiles of Shuvas for Choshim Mishpat Simon Ayin Zayin, which incidentally Ayin Zayin is 77, which is the gematria of Mazel. He says a fascinating thing. He said that humiliation, this woman goes through public humiliation. Humiliation cleans the neshama to such a pure level that it brings tremendous bracha. Sure, this woman did a big aver, she's a prutza, but she was subjected to public humiliation. She becomes so holy after this event that she gets all the brachas in the world. And we all know the famous story that people say over, that if you want to have a Yeshua, find somebody who is humiliated in public and quickly ask them not to respond. They should be min hanalovim, the einam oilvim. Ask them for a bracha. At that moment, their bracha has the koyach of the gadol adar, because that's exactly what we see from the Niksav and Izazara. When someone takes a humiliation and swallows, that makes them to such a high madrega. It makes their neshama so pure that all the brachas come to them. And I remember very clearly, all of my daughters, we had problems with shidduchim. But one of my daughters, I remember it was Elul, and everyone was still in the country, so there was a very small oilam for Mincha Erev Shabbos. And we were middle of the Shtilah Shmon Esrei, so you're not looking around, your eyes are closed. And what happened was someone came in and made a little noise, I don't know who it was. And then somebody whose voice I did recognize, in the middle of the Shtilah Shmon Esrei, stopped, and he started screaming at this guy. You lowlife, you're always disturbing the Bishmedrish, get out of here, we don't even need you in our shul. And he really ripped the guy to shreds. So I was so happy. Because now I have someone to get a bracha from. The problem that I had was, I recognized the screamer, but I had no idea who I was screaming at. So as soon as I finished Shmon Esrei, right away saying, who was the victim? Who was the victim? And they told me who it was. I ran right over to him during Kabbalah Shabbos, and I schlepped him out of the Bishmedrish. And I asked him to give me a bracha that I should find a good shidduch for my daughter, and he gave me a better bracha. He said, you should find a good shidduch for your daughter, and you should have all the money in the world to pay for it, and to support your children and all your children, shidduch for all your children. And right after that, mamish, right after that, maybe Sunday, the shidduch that my daughter ended up marrying, ended up coming. So mamish works, and I'm just wondering to myself, what if I need a bracha? Can I go over to somebody and humiliate him in public, and then get a bracha from him? Does that work? Yeah. So Dr. Gemara, Eishes Mamzer Lemamzer. Again, we're now analyzing the brisa that we quoted. So this is a small Gemara tucked away on Daf Chav Vav of Sotah, but it has implications all over Shas. Pshita Frek the Gemara. It's a perfectly kosher marriage. Of course, she'll be subject to the rules of Sotah. Dr. Gemara, no, Malatem Afushi Psulun Leifush. Maybe we don't want them to stay married. Maybe we don't want them to have children. Rashi says something that's off the charts. Zokt Rashi, what does it mean? Afushe psulim. We don't want. Loi nasa shalom b'neim. This couple, we want to break up their marriage. Because halavai lo yifra v'lo yarba. Let them not do puravu. Hoyel v'chol doiroisef mamzerin. This sounds very much like the Gemara is saying that a mamzer does not have a mitzvah puravu. To the contrary, we want to minimize their offspring. And for the Gemara, Kamash Malon, that Avada, they're a marriage that we do want to save, and Avada, they are Mekayim Puravu, and Avada, they're subject to the Lachs of Sotah. So this is the crux of the Shaila, whether or not there's a Kiyam of Puravu if one creates a Mamzer. Zok the Gemara Baiter. Eishes Ger, the Eved Meshuchwer, again, the island is. Who said that? As soon as you have a son and a daughter, you're Mekayim Puravu. Oh, so I don't know. I don't know those things. So it says Eishes Ger ve'Eved Meshuchar ve'Islandness. The Bach takes out islandness, and it'll be obvious why, because the Gemara is going to bring out the Chiddush of the Ger and Eved Meshuchar, and clearly that Chiddush does not apply to islandness. Pshita. Of course, an Eishes Ger and an Eved Meshuchar should be included in the Parsha of Sotah. Dr. Gemara, no, I would have thought maybe not. Maybe the whole Parsha only applies to Bnei Yisrael. It doesn't apply to Gerim. So an Eved Meshuchar is also a Ger. Kamash Malan, our Mishnah, that, in fact, the parsha of Sotah applies to Gerim as well. How do you know? You have a good kasha. It says Bnei Yisrael. V'em hachanami. So the Gemara of Amarta ribuyahu. It says Amarta leim. The Amarta is a ribuy. It's inclusive. It even includes a ger. It even includes an Evan Meshucher. Eishes koyin choisa. Now we're going back to the Mishnah. We're going to go back to our regularly scheduled program. Now that we finished our commercial break. Eishes koyin choisa. Why in the world would you think that an Eishes koyin is not choisa? It says by Sotah, if she was loinit basa, she's going to be asura, right? Now let's think about it. A Eishes Yisrael, if she's mizana and she's not nitpasa, she's not nenas, yes, then she's going to be asur. Nitpasa, if she was nenas, she'll be mutter. But a kohen's wife, even if she was nensa, she's also asur. So the phrase in the parsha of Sotah seems to exclude a kohen, because the phrase in the parsha of Sotah seems to be speaking about a woman who will only be asur if she was mizana b'ratzain and she wasn't nispasa. V'zu, but the Eishes kohen hoyel v'nispasa asura v'bal she's asur even if she was nenas emalosishta. Maybe the parsha of Sotah doesn't apply to her. Kamashmalon, in fact, that the parsha of Sotah does apply to her, and therefore she will drink. And if she drinks and she comes out clean, umuteres l'bayil, the Mishnah said, we can take it to the bank. We can be sure that she was not zinsa, and therefore she'll be mutter to her husband. Shita, why would she be different than any other woman who drinks from the Mesoita and she comes out clean? Amar Afuna, we're speaking where b'misnavna. Her body started to deteriorate. Break the Gemara, misnavna habat kumaya. If she's misnavna, isn't that a signal that she was nichshol? So how could you say umuteres l'bayla? Zok the Gemara misnavna derech evorim. The symptoms and the ailments that she started to contract were not those that are normally associated with the Sotah. Her eyes didn't bulge, her vase didn't bulge, her hips didn't collapse, her stomach didn't collapse. She got arthritis, she got headaches, so her health is suffering, but not Sotah related. So Ma'udetema, you might say, Hazanu Zanoi. She really was nitma. She really had znus. So how come she didn't blow up? The reason why she's not suffering the classic ailments of Mesoita is Mishum de Ba'onis Zanohi. Maybe she was nenas, and the Torah is just and the Sotah is just going to show us that she was nenas and she's also to her husband the kohen, but she wasn't berotzen, and that's why she's not blowing up. But so maybe that would be a signal, Kamash Malon, that no, if she didn't blow up, she's in Gantin Muteres Labaila, we're not even choshed that she was nenas. The question is, misnavna is in oinish. It's not a geshmak thing. Nobody wants to have health issues. If this woman was nenas, why would we punish her with misnavna? Or just to show that she can't live with her husband? What did she do wrong? She was nenas. So it's really Bornstein spoke out very nicely. Says if you look in the Siddur Agra on the Alchetz Shechatonu L'Fanecha Ba'oinus of Baratzon, they bring there a parish that there's a lot of oinshim, true, but there's a lot of oinshim that could have been avoided too. Lamazach Lishnarin, yeah, she might have gotten violated by this man, but who told her to go on a date with him? Who told her to go on a date with him? So even sometimes an oinus you have to do true before. That's one comment he makes. The second comment he makes, but no means no. The second comment he makes is that if someone was Kodesh V'Torah, Hashem wouldn't bring him to a situation where he'd have to be nanas. Zok the Gemara weiter. Eishes Sris Shoisa. So this Gemara is very problematic. The wife of a Sris is Shoisa. So we learned Rashi on the Mishnah. Rashi is very clear with the situation with an Eishes Sris. And let's look at Rashi that we learned when we learned the Mishnah. Rashi says Eishes Sris. Break Rashi, I have a problem. Because Rashi is making an assumption that a Sris cannot have bia at all. I guess he can't get an erection. So therefore he can't have bia at all. If he can't have bia at all, then Sotah doesn't work for such a person. Because we have a rule, that in order for Sotah to work, the husband had to have been intimate with his wife at least once. If he was a Sris, there was never that intimacy. Zok Rashi, he married her and he was healthy. Only afterwards he became a Sris. Therefore, the parsha of Sotah applies to him. The Kadma Shchibas Baal Boil, There was a shchivas baal before he became sick, before he became a sris. So it's clear from this Rashi that a sris cannot do a bia. Clear as can be. This Gemara is going to tell us the opposite of that, and that's going to be Shver on Rashi. Of course you should drink. Why shouldn't she be able to drink? The Gemara assumes that of course you can have a bia. You would have told me about the Ishach, she had to have had a bia, and he couldn't have had a bia. Kamash Malon. So what is the Kamash Malon? Could he have a bia or can't he have a bia? So Rashi says, Kamash Malon, all you need is mikdam shchivas bala boil. Usris bar shchivahu. Asrus could have relations. That means he could have an erection and he could have a relation. The avlagav delav bars riyahu. Asris will not be able to procreate, but bia he can still have. So therefore, he's not precluded from the balda ishech because they could have had bia. The problem is Rashi tells us at the beginning in the Mishnah that she could not have had bia. So how do you fix this? So the Mashal actually says that Rashi in our Mishnah is not really Rashi. This is Rashi, where Shris could have bia. Rashi in the Mishnah is a Gillian and some other parish that someone dropped in there. We're speaking about a Shrischama, the mutter lakaima that he's allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. But Shris Adam, if he made himself into a Shris, also lakaima, there he wouldn't be able to remain married to her because it says in the pasuk Yavi Psurdaka, and the Shris Adam has the status of a Psurdaka. Tosfos argues on Rashi, and Tosfos says even Shris Adam wouldn't be considered a Psurdaka. This is what we mentioned earlier, that even her father, she could make kinui, the husband can make kinui from, and that wouldn't be yichud. And that's what Chana was going to do. Pshita, is it not pashut that you could make kinui from any arayis? No, it's not pashut. You know why? Because it says nitma. Shnei pamim. It actually says nitma many times, but we're focusing on two specific occurrences of the word nitma in the psukim of Sotah. Echad lebal ve'echad lebayil. One tells you that if she was nitma, she's usher to the baal, and one tells you that she was usher to the baal. So let's think. What type of man does the parsha of Sotah apply to? A man that she will become usher to because of this nus, meaning the baal or the boil. But her father, she was usher to even before anything happened. So therefore, maybe she's not included in the parsha of Sotah because she will not become usher to her father because of the Sotah. She's already usher to her father. Maybe they're not included in the parsha of Sotah. Kamash below that they are included in the parsha of Sotah. If someone says to his wife, "I'm mekaning you," you should not seclude yourself with that child. That's not a kinui. Why? Because ish amar rachmana v'loy katan. The Mishnah also said, "Chutz min she'eino ish." If you're mekana your wife and say, "Don't be found with this fellow who's not an ish," that's not a good kinui. Break the Gemara. What are we excluding? Who is not an ish? Who is not a mensch? Don't get me started. Who's not a mensch? Mai. Lemute mai. What are we trying to exclude? Ilema lemute shachav. Shachav is somebody who cannot get an erection. Although it's not clear from Rashi or Tosfos that way, let's see what Rashi or Tosfos say. Shachav is shebesarei nishraf v'chala. It seems like his skin flakes off. V'yavesh ve'en by koyach. But another symptom is that he can't do a bia. And Tosfos says by Shachav, Pirush ben Chananel, she'enoi boil kidarkoi. He's not able to make bia. Ve'enoi mazriya, and he can't have children either. So whatever it is, it's someone who can't make a bia. So if someone says, "Don't be found with that gentleman, Rachman al-Son, who's sick, and he can't do bia anyway, but don't be secluded with him," that would not be a good kinui. Break the Gemara, that can't be pshat because Shmuel holds it is a good kinui. So the way you want to learn pshat, Shmuel says that's not pshat because Shmuel holds you could be mekana. And not only that, the bia of a shachav is enough to say upoishel b'truma, to say that if this was a bas kohen who became nivelas to a shachav who was not a proper person for her, was an erba for her, then she becomes spoiled. She could no longer eat truma from her father's household. Zok the Gemara, makin al yadai. Now the Gemara actually turns around 180 degrees. Until now we were saying that you shouldn't be able to be makin al yadai because he can't have a bia. Now the Gemara is saying, Pshita, why wouldn't you be able to? The Gemara is now taking the position where surely he could make a bia. Dr. Gemara, you know why it's not pashit? The only type of biyos and men that we're talking about to be included in the parsha of Sotah are men that could procreate. And the shachav, even if you can have biyah, he definitely cannot procreate. So maybe he's not included in the whole parsha of Sotah. Kamash Malon, that he's included in the parsha of Sotah. Shmuel said another halacha. If he's an inappropriate zivuk for a bas kohen and he has bia with her, she will no longer be able to truma. Pshita pashit no. Whenever there's a psul, the Torah uses the lashon of lo yichal zarai. His children shouldn't be mechulal. So we learn from there the isle zera lichalil. Someone who can have children, he can cause a woman to become mechulal. The less lezer, but someone who cannot have children, loy lichalel, cannot cause someone to become mechulal. Kamash malam, that even a shachav could passel some of meaning truma, and a shachav you could be mekana. So once again, who is the she'eno yish that you cannot be mekana for? The elo, let's try plan B. If a man tells his wife, "Don't be secluded with John the goy," that's not a good kinui. How could you say it's not a good kinui? It surely is a good kinui. And a goy who is boil, a woman who is eating truma, she will no longer be able to eat truma. So you clearly see that the bia of a goy is like any other bia. What was the having that shouldn't be? Having it shouldn't be is because it says vizir mas susum zir mosum. They're considered like animals. So we would have thought that it's not considered a bia lagabe kinui and stira. Kamash malan, of course, yes. Truma mekanan yodai. So now we turn it around 180 degrees. Rav Hamnuna is telling me a big chiddush that Ovid Kachav Mekan Al Yodei Pshita. Why not? I would have thought the same thing that we said before. Nitma shtei pamim. It says nitma twice in the parsha of Sotah to tell us echad lebal v'echad leboyel, to teach us that these two men who were mutter to her up until now are now going to become also to her. Heichad the kamitzra b'haz nus. What type of men are included in the parsha of Sotah? Men that if she was nevelas to them, they were mutter until now, and they're going to become osir. But this guy, hoyel basur v'kaima, since she's always osir, but marrying a guy, amaloi, you would have thought that a guy is not included in the parsha of Sotah. Kamash malon, that a guy is included in the parsha of Sotah. Upoisel b'truma, Rav Hamnuna also said that a guy who's boil a Jewish girl passes her from being able to truma. Pshita, that's also pashut. Why would you say otherwise? I would have thought, when the pasuk tells us that a bas kohen who marries a Yisrael can no longer eat truma, it says bas kohen ki sia leishar. Sia means havaya, means kedushin. Means kedushin is typhus. Omer Rachmana. The bar havaya in, a lav bar havaya loy. Someone who cannot make a kedushin on this girl would not passel her from eating truma. A goy cannot make kedushin on the girl. Kamash malon. Nevertheless, Rav Hamnuna says, don't learn the pasuk that way. And in fact, if she's novellas to a goy, she will be compulsal from truma, and we know it from a different pasuk. The pasuk midir Rabbi Yochanan, no Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Minayin lo ovid kachavim ve'evet shebo ala kenis v'ala levi ala bas yosha p'slua. How do we know that ovid kachavim would passel these women from truma? Shenemer, it says as follows: this pasuk is talking about a bas kohen who is allowed to eat truma from her father's household, and she married a Yisrael. When she marries a Yisrael, she could no longer eat truma. But if she doesn't have any children with her husband, and her husband dies, or her husband divorces her, so she's no longer tethered to Yisrael, she automatically goes back to her father's household, and she could now, once again, resume eating truma. So the pasuk says, "Ubaskoin kisia almana ugrusha." A baskoin who becomes an almana ugrusha, meaning she had a proper kedushin, and the kedushin was nullified through the fact that her husband died or that her husband divorced her. Only such a girl is allowed to go back to eat truma from her father's household. If she had a relationship that would render her an almana when the relationship ends, or that would render her a grusha when the relationship ends, such a relationship, when it's terminated, she can go back to her father's household and eat truma. But if she had a relationship with a goy, she cannot go back to eat truma. She's nefselis forever. The eved she'ein le almanus v'gerishba. Because a woman will not become an almana if she's married to a goy and the goy dies. You know why? Because she was never married to him. And therefore, she will not be able to go back and eat truma. So you see that a goy passels a girl from eating truma. So we're back to the drawing board. What does the Mishnah mean to say, Lemute misha eno yish, who is excluded from the parsha of Kinoi, if someone says to his wife, I don't want you to lock yourself up with Sammy the sheep, that's not called a proper kinui. You know why? No one's saying it's not an isser, it's an isser chomer, but it's not classified as nus. Doing avoid zara is also an isser chomer, but it's not nus. So too, this is not znus, and Sotah only applies to things that are znus. Omer le Rava mi parzakayil Ravashi, minoha milsa the Omer Rabbanon ein znus bebehema. How do you know that a relationship with an animal is not called znus? Zok Gemara, we know the Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, Loisavi esnan zoyna umechir kelev. You're not allowed to bring as a carbon an esnan zoyna or a mechir kelev. An esnan zoyna is someone who wants to go sleep with a zoyna, and he pays for her services. How does he pay for her services? He gives her a sheep. So you can have a very popular zoyna that banks, she has a whole flock of sheep, which are all the payments for her work. She's also a wonderful woman. She wants to go bring a carbon. So she wants to bring one of those sheep. Such a sheep is Ta'eva. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want that as a carbon. Mechir kelev is somebody has a dog and he needs a sheep. His friend has a sheep and he needs a dog. So they made a barter. I'll give you my sheep, you give me your dog. So the person who got the sheep as a barter for the dog, that sheep also is disqualified from being brought as a carbon. The Tanya, we learned, the Esnan Zoyna is also, but the Esnan Kelev, if you flip it around, and the Esnan Kelev and the Mechir Zoyna would be mutter. What? That's what it says, yeah. So what is an Esnan Kelev? An Esnan Kelev is a guy has a dog who he loves. He loves his dog, and he wants to give his dog an afternoon that he'll never forget. So he goes over to a very pretty Zoyna, and he says, I want you to have relations with my dog, and I'm going to give you a sheep to do it. So that's called an Esnan Kelev. That's not usher. Now, if it was considered znus when she was going to have relations with the kelev, so then that should be an esnan zoyna. Elamai, it's not an esnan zoyna; it's an esnan kelev. And mechir zoyna is I have a sheep, you have a servant who happens to be a zoyna. Let's swap. So those are mutarid. Shenever gam shneim. It says kitei avos Hashem gam shneim. It could have said kitei avos Hashem. It says gam shneim to tell you that only these two exactly the esnan zoyna and mechir kelev are usher, but the other way around. The esnan kelev and mechir zoyna will be mutter. Shnayim v'lo yarba. So you see clearly that znus with a dog is not znus. So that takes care of that the Mishay Nation is referring to a behema. Right to the Gemara, the Ella Vela Shich V'Zera Lomali. We just said that even men who cannot have children are included in the rules of Sotah. So if that's the case, why does the pasuk say Shich V'Zera? What do we learn from there? Zok to Gemara, mi boile l'chadetanya. Shich v'zera prat l'dover acher. It's telling us that if something else happened other than a shich v'zera, which is a complete bia, that would not be something that you could make kino yostira for. What is that other thing? My dover acher. Amar Absheshes prat l'shekinla shaloi kedarka. He said, I don't want you to have a relationship with him, even as a bia shaloi kedarka. Amar Rava said, how could you say that wouldn't be included in the parsha of Sotah? We know b'chala Torah kula, shaloi kedarka and kedarka are treated exactly the same. Shaloi kedarka mishkevei isha ksiv, and we learn from there, it says l'shikvei ish mishkevei isha, we learn that it doesn't make a difference if the bia is kedarka or shaloi kedarka, it's a regular bia, so of course you could be mekana a woman from that. Amar Rava, he told her, I don't even want you to snuggle up with him where he's going to just do bia on your outside, on your ver. So that's not a proper bia, and therefore you cannot make kina for that. Amalei Abaye, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. Pritzusa ba'almahi. That's not bia. That's just pritzus. Upritzusa miyasa rachmana. If a woman does that with a man, a married woman does that with a man, I mean, it's definitely not a nice thing, but it doesn't make her usher to her husband. He prohibited nishika. Nishika here means if he touches with the tip of his aver, he touches her makom erba. That would not be considered a bia, and therefore the Torah needs to tell you that for this kidney doesn't work. Hara is considered a gemar bia. Hara is a partial bia. But what exactly is it? So we're getting a little graphic. Hara means once the crown goes all the way inside, that's considered a Gemar Bia. That's a Bia that's answers a woman to her husband. That's a Bia snus. That involves the Einshim. That's what a Bia is. Albal Nishika, but if he's merely touching his tip against her Makam Erba, Albal Nishika Klumi. That's nothing. So if that's nothing, then it makes sense. Hainu the Asi Kra Lemut Nishika. That's why the pasuk would have told us that Nishika is not going to be considered a stira, and you can't be mekana for that, because it's definitely pretty bad, but it's not considered a bia. So we would understand why the Torah would be memai from Shech Vazera such a situation. Elamandam or harazu Nishika, but if you hold merely touching with your aver the makam aver, if you're going to say that's considered a bia, so that's mamish and isser. So how can you possibly say that Nishika is not a good kinui stira? It definitely is. That's mamish bia. Michael Meimar. So Zaktimar, we're going to have to go back to our original pshat. L'shakinula derech evarim. He told the woman, I don't even want you to have anything like derech evarim. The Gemara asked earlier, that's prisusa ba'alma. Zaktimar, you're right. But umau the tema b'kapei the baal tali rachmana. The kinui is totally in something that would make the baal very upset. Ubal lakakapid. A baal who has his wife doing the derech evarim would freak out. So that's something that you might say kinui works for. Kamash Malanda, no. If it's not officially Abiyah Asura, it's not going to be something that you can make kinui for. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished off Chavav. Chavav is Shem Havaya. It's Kedusha, so let's not think otherwise. And we should be Zoichet to all the brachas of the day and every day. Panosav Ravach, health, wealth, Shaduchem, Yiddish Anaches, long life, and most important, to greet Mashiach B'Karav Mamash.
Shkoyach Yosy.
Go have a safe trip.
Thank you.
M2 is Moshe turn 2.